don't have access to daily social media. I don't have access to daily news. I don't have access to a lot of what goes on in the world.
Why is that?
For my own mental health.
The love has to be there regardless.
Oh, I always got a slap as well. It came in equal doses.
You can't fire your kids, so that's one thing that's probably different from kids and the employees.
Dr. Hassan, welcome.
Hi.
Now you're
Nice
a
to be here.
doctor in psychiatry,
I am.
and probably one of the first questions is, what is the difference between psychiatry and psychology?
Good question. So a psychiatrist is someone that's been to medical school, qualified as a doctor, and then specialised in the field of psychiatry. So we can prescribe medication, we treat mental illness and often lean towards a pharmacological way of treating mental illness, whereas a psychologist is very much about the understanding of the human mind and human behaviour as a kind of a field of science on its own. In the field that I work in, we often do a bit of both, so you've got to be kind of quite psychologically minded and have a good understanding of kind of the whole person to be able to think about what treatment they might need, where pharmacology is probably an aspect of that.
And what brought you to psychiatry?
Well, my late father was a psychiatrist, God rest his soul, and it was actually 18 years ago today, as it happens, yeah. And I guess I was interested in the idea of being a doctor broadly, and then once I qualified as a doctor, I realised that understanding how people worked, why they did what they did, what motivated people to behave how they behave, and to try and make a material difference in people's lives and changing the trajectory of their lives was interesting to me. And so I went down that road, and I've been working with young people, child and adolescent psychiatry now for a few years.
And was there a reason that you've gone down the road of working with children?
Yeah, I think when I was training, I realised I was quite good at it. I could connect with young people, but also from a reward level, it was interesting because you could change the trajectory of a young person's life by a couple of degrees, but then where they end up is vastly different from where they were going because you can change that trajectory early on. And so you find that actually you do make a difference. You actually can kind of impact someone's life and see a transformation happen over a period of months or years where, because you've been involved, something positive can happen.
From my understanding, the first 7 years of a children's life is some of the most important years, and it's called the imprint era. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, so a child, broadly speaking, the first few years of their life, that's when they develop their entire worldview. They'll realise, kind of whether they'll form opinions on whether the world's safe, unsafe, whether they're kind of some of the core beliefs about themselves start to get formed, and they'll see the world through their caregiver's eyes for those first few years. So they form those beliefs not kind of as an isolated bubble, but often through the people that are around them, and so that's why those first few years are really crucial in the kind of the formation of personality and in the formation of worldview for a young person.
The belief is now that in some ways we're living in one of the greatest times for human civilization, but also one of the most challenging. What's your view on how we live now, and does it have an impact that can enhance a child's quality of life, or is there also detrimental effects to how we live our modern life?
There's a lot to unpick there, I guess. I guess it all depends on definitions, right? So the greatest era of human history, I guess it would depend on how we're defining the greatest era. Certainly the most technologically advanced era of human history as far as we know, which has a lot of upside in terms of the potential impact on people's lives, the potential quality of life improvements that it can have. but we've also seen a lot of side effects. We've seen what happens when society goals start shifting, and how that has an impact on everyone in society, but not least the young people in society. So it's probably not coincidental that we're seeing the highest number of mental health rates in young people that we've ever seen. You know, the highest number of cases of autism and neurodevelopmental disorders that we've ever seen. I don't think there's probably one single factor that's causing it, but if we're going to take a kind of helicopter view of what we're doing, I think there's probably as much doing wrong as we are right, and probably someone needs to take a look at how we're doing it.
I think digital seems to get a bad rap. For everybody seems to point the finger at iPhones, iPads, television, lack of exercise. But is there an upside to the digital side of our modern life?
Of course there is. I mean, this idea that we should demonize something or make it kind of the heavenly sent object is ridiculous. I think, like anything, it has upsides and downsides. And like anything, what we've probably not done is figured out how we can teach kids the rules of how to use a tool like that. Much the same way that, you know, I have a 1-year-old at home and I teach him, if there's a sharp object, how he might want to kind of not touch it until he gets older, and then when my 6-year-old wants to cut tomatoes, I have to guide her about how to use the knife and the sharp object. I can't therefore say knives are bad, but I can't say that you know, they're absolutely good all the time either. And I think technology is much the same. I think if we have systems that we allow young people to develop the resources mentally to be able to use technology in a good way, then it's probably overwhelmingly good. But what ended up happening was technology came along, none of us knew what to do with it, and then suddenly it was in everyone's hand in an uncontrolled way, and it still is kind of in a runaway, uncontrolled way. And what we're seeing is a lot of detrimental elements to kind of social media and technology, as well as multiple good ones. And I think what's happening now is probably the catching up starting to take place. So there's a lot of companies and a lot of entrepreneurs that are trying to figure out how we can now use technology to catch up, to use it as a tool that can actually end up benefiting not just young people, but obviously that's the main focus of what I'm interested in. Yeah.
Is there like a common theme with the children that come to your practice? Is there like the top 3 or top 5 things that seems to be most common in them, and does that stem from background or maybe having too much or having too little?
I probably won't say that there's a theme of mental illness that stems directly from technology. I think that's probably a stretch.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, like everyday life that the kids come to you, is there a theme that maybe their parents are struggling, or maybe their parents have so much that they don't know?
Yeah, I think every individual case is different, but we see a lot of anxiety cases now. We're inundated with kids that have anxiety. We're inundated with kids that have low mood and depression. I think those are the 2 things that we see an awful lot of. COVID probably contributed a great deal to how kids are struggling at the moment. We're seeing a lot of kids that are struggling to get into school, and kind of have become school refusers. And then that's a combination of anxiety. There's a huge number of kids now that are being diagnosed with neurodevelopmental disorders like autism and ADHD. And because they're diagnosed, you know, there's that many kids now that have those conditions. It's probably time we reevaluate how we do things like education. It's probably time that we reevaluate how we do things like, you know, kind of what the markers are that we expect kids to adhere to, or what the markers are that tell us that a kid's functioning well or not. So a lot of times kids might come to us because they're struggling to get into school. And the question really is, well, is school the right environment for the kid. Like, you know, schools haven't changed for 100 years plus, but everything else in society has. Everything else in the kids' world has changed. And if a child has, say, a neurodevelopmental condition like autism, a school environment might not be the best place for that child to learn and to get educated in the way that sets them up for what they want to do for the rest of their life. So I think there's a lot of broader questions about what can we do as a society to start kind of reevaluating what we do for young people. The answer is, you said, why does it happen? I think one of the things that has happened in society is that the makeup or the dynamic within families has changed massively over the past kind of 30, 50 years. I think it's almost unheard of to have a single parent working, kind of household with one income. Most households now need two incomes to survive. And then when that happens, there's obviously a gap where the raising of the children has to be done somewhere, somehow. And so if that gets outsourced more and more to schools or to whatever local authority systems that we outsource them to, there's obviously going to be a consequence to that. So I think, there's a lot of big, broad issues that are happening that I think need to be addressed and dealt with. And I don't think we need to just accept that there's just a mental health crisis. Kind of that we almost look at it the wrong way around, don't we? We come in and go, well, 1 in 5 kids has a mental health condition in any given year, and we start as if that's the baseline, and let's figure out what to do next now that we know that. But actually, shouldn't we say, how have we created a society where 1 in 5 kids has a mental health condition?
Whenever I lowered my expectations on life, I woke up and I was a little bit more happier, because I didn't expect for it to be so perfect. For me personally, and I think definitely I believe that it's individual's ability along with the correct people to help them. But I think it's more difficult when you have a complete umbrella approach to something that must be defined as an individual trying to become the best version of themselves.
Sure. I think mental wellness isn't the absence of negative emotion, though. So mental wellness doesn't mean that I'm going to be happy every day. And this is the nonsense that's being spouted all over social media, is that, you live your best life and you kind of in a state of peace and tranquility every day. And that of course is nonsense. Mental wellness is the ability to experience negative emotion, but have the skill set to navigate it in a healthy way. So things happen in life that make you upset, things happen in life that make you stressed or anxious. And if you're in a space where you're mentally well, then you'll be able to navigate those difficulties in a way that doesn't overwhelm you or consume you. It's interesting as well what you said about kind of lowering your expectations with life, because I think, don't know if you're familiar with Mo Godat. He's the ex-director of Google X, chief operating officer or something of Google X. And so he wrote a book called Solve for Happy. And in Solve for Happy, he describes how he had a devastating life experience of the death of his 18-year-old son. And then used that experience to come up with an equation, I guess, for happiness. Broadly speaking, happiness is where the expectation meets kind of life where what your expectation of life is meets what life is. And so it's about you bringing down and coming down to an expectation that you can live with and not kind of overshoot so that you are always disappointed or anxious or low. It's a nice enough kind of equation. Probably not all encompassing, but it's interesting that you thought that as well.
Although all of these difficult times in my life have happened, and going through them, it was probably a time for me to say, why me? But what helped me get through them was the support and love that people showed for me. I didn't realize that when I was a child or even a teenager, apart from when I needed the hug. You just automatically go back to that, and when you get that feeling that there's somebody there to support you and give you a hug, it brings back memories of it was okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of literature on that. There's a book called Why Love Matters by a psychologist, I forget her name now, and the psychiatrist Gabor Mate talks about this a lot, about the importance of love in the first few years of a child's life, specifically unconditional as well. So a lot of the time parents mistake given the affection in return for when you've been good or when you've done the thing that I've asked you to do, and that can actually backfire a little bit. So for anyone listening, it's all about the unconditional love. And that doesn't mean that there aren't consequences to bad behavior or kind of things that you don't want, but the love has to be there regardless.
But after my initial childhood, my teenage years and all of the ups and downs were my doing. The early years I had very little control of, but the ups and downs from going to secondary school and on was it, and to this day is all my doing. I'm fully aware of that.
Okay, so what keeps you going then? Because again, you said that you set this thing that you want to be independent, and you want to have no one have any control over you or your life, but you're still working, you're still trying to grow. So what's that coming from?
And that's a good question. Now I would feel that I've spent decades trying to figure out who I am, trying to figure out the recipe for success that I have, and trying to fine tune it. And it would be unfair to not finish off the recipe and bake the perfect cake. And if I can do that, I'll be then able to hand part of it over to my business partners, in mentorship programs, through how I will coach. Okay.
And is the perfect cake a thing that's kind of an abstract concept in your head now, or do you know what it is?
Well, that deep emotion will still be there, but I do now know that I have a very solid recipe for success. And the recipe is that I'm probably not afraid to fail anymore, because I've failed so many times. The only difference with possibly me and the mass of people is I've done so many things. So I've failed 100 times more than most people, and I've maybe succeeded.
So it's the tenacity to keep going.
It's just the constant of not being afraid to take a downturn or a fail.
What have you sacrificed on this journey? Because you said you're 42, you've accomplished an awful lot, but are there things that you wish that you may have in your life that you don't, because of that drive that you've had, where you've been so singularly focused on demonstrating, I guess, to yourself, to the world, that you can reach this thing that you're aiming for? What's the cost of that?
I think any sacrifice that I've had is able to be achievable in the future. I think there's lessons, possibly a really strong understanding of peace of mind, being able to be resilient and go through tough times, the appreciation for things in my life that I wouldn't have had if it came easier.
Okay. So, but what is it that when you're on your deathbed and people are gathered around, people are going to be talking about you and saying, "Oh no, it's devastating that you're about to go." What would you want people to be saying at that point? Because what you talked about a lot is obviously a lot of the things that you've achieved for yourself financially and internally, but I wonder whether there's any other drive about what externally, and whether anything external of you has had to be put on the back burner to achieve those things.
Well, you give up a lot of time.
Yep.
The only thing is, with giving up time, through the quest for understanding myself, I'm a very dopaminergic person. I crave excitement and I crave challenges.
Yep.
If I was not to do what I was doing, it could go down another path that maybe wouldn't be so. I could go down another path that maybe wouldn't be so promising, or could end up lead me in a worse position. So I really don't have any regrets. I just know that I have to. I really don't have any regrets. I just know there has to be some sort of sacrifice. So I'm okay with the sacrifice. I just know that there needs to be a bit of rest, recovery, enjoyment, and maybe find out more about yourself along the way, because we evolve. What I want now in my 40s is not what I wanted in my 20s.
You mentioned like the dopamine hits that you search for and long for, and that kind of addiction to feeling like you're doing something productive that can happen, or feeling like you're making progress. When we're not always making progress, but we can, at least if we're doing the thing that makes us feel like it, then we can sometimes get sucked up in that. Yeah. And we can just kind of lie to ourselves a little bit that we're making progress when we're not. Does that ever happen to you?
All the time.
Yeah.
But what I found is that, and I've learned that the goal, when I achieved my goal, that was not, it was the quest, it was the doing, it was the journey before it. That is my driver. So what drives you?
I guess like everything is multifaceted. So I've got, I'm very blessed to have a lovely home life with wife and kids, and that's a core element of who I am and what I focused on for many years. But the other bit is I'm really, really passionate about kind of trying to make, as ridiculous as it sounds, trying to make the world a better place by innovating, by using technology, developing apps, developing ideas that through the experience and knowledge that I've accumulated with the work that I've done to try and apply that. So we touched earlier on the fact that we've got kind of this mental health crisis and the world is seemingly in disarray. I think partly that comes down to a lack of emotional literacy. I think emotional literacy would be that process of trying to kind of identify what an emotion is, because we don't feel in words, do we? And you don't really think in words. You just feel. And if you just feel, but you don't name it, then it's very difficult to process it. It's very difficult to do anything with it. So kind of the app that I'm developing, Mood It, that we developed a while back, and we're doing a new version, that's really about kind of upskilling people to be able to identify what they're feeling really easily, and then share it with the world, and about anything and everything everywhere. So whether that's excitement over a football game, where you'll be able to share how you feel really easily, kind of it's a mood slider and then there's a word cloud above it, and so it makes it really easy. So even if you're not very emotionally literate, it'll really help.
So this is for all ages? For
all ages, yeah. And then you'll be able to see how other people feel about the thing that you're interested in. And whether that's, as I say, football or a news story or politics or world events. And people are okay generally with sharing thoughts and feelings online more so than ever. And what this does is it really kind of is a tool that can be applied everywhere, so that people can do it really easily and then see how the world feels about it too. So that's a big driver at the moment. There's a big element of education as well, and as I say, I work with kids that have autism a lot, and we touched on the school system earlier and how I think there needs to be an updated version of that. So I'm working with my CTO, who's an AI expert, and we're working on a model to try and bring education to 2024 in a different way, which I hope is going to be interesting for the world and can actually make an impact. So the driver for me really is trying to create something that outlives me, that my kids can look at me and go, that was really cool, you did something amazing there. Yeah, I'd like that to be something that I can leave behind. So I guess being able to produce something that has some kind of legacy effect is a big driver for me.
And when did you discover this is something you'd like to do? Has it always been in you?
I think it's always been there. I think you know, even when I was studying to be a doctor, I was trying different things, entrepreneurial things. You know, I've worked with different companies, and I've had more failures than you can count as well along the way, which is fine and part of the process. And I think the idea of being a doctor and serving one patient at a time is really rewarding in one sense, but I've always loved the idea of scale. I've always loved the idea of having an impact at scale, and that's something that as a doctor you don't really get to do. So I'm hoping I can kind of get the best of both worlds, where I do have that one-to-one impact with a young person, but also develop tools and systems that can have an impact at scale and genuinely have a kind of positive net footprint on humanity, I guess. Yeah.
You come across as a very optimistic, happy person. Has there ever been a time where you had to dig deep, and how did you get through those?
All the time. I don't know that there's optimism and having to dig deep are probably just two separate things. So I think having optimism that the world can be better, I guess, needs to be my default position. As a psychiatrist that sees people that have gone through often terrible things, trauma and, you know, kind of family breakdowns and all kinds of things like that, the default position that I'm in is just because it's like this now doesn't mean it can't be better. And I think that applies to almost everything that we see in life at kind of whatever scale you want. And so, I don't know that doom and gloom or vilifying things is a helpful way to operate. When difficult times come, you do have to dig deep. When difficult times come, it forces you to question your belief systems, which is always healthy. I think anyone that has a kind of flag in the sand that says, this is my belief system, full stop, that's the end of the story, is probably not someone you need to listen to. So I think at any given moment, I can only tell you where I'm at right now based on the experience I've had, but on the understanding that I might be somewhere else in a year from now in my understanding of things.
So currently I don't have any children, but I feel like I've got a big family of business partners, employees, a really good network of people that I care about and want them to be the best version of themselves. There's always a challenge in a workplace, and probably my best way of dealing with it, or the best way I see fit, is to try and find out how I can be the best version of myself, and then try and implement that through my learnings and then teachings. Is there anything that you see that could, or any advice you could give to a workplace currently?
So I think you can't fire your kids, so that's one thing that's probably different from kids and the employees. But I think being the best version of yourself is obviously a helpful thing for everyone around you. But being the best version of yourself is quite a complicated thing. So I think you've probably learned to do things like take on two quite contradictory emotional positions at the same time. And these are skills that I think everyone can learn. So I call it the emotional superposition, where you can simultaneously have two what seem to be contradictory emotions at the same time. Where I might be satisfied with who I am and what I've got, but at the same time extremely hungry for more.
That's me morning and night.
Yeah, so that's something that but that's not
every
something
day.
That's not something that you probably were born with. You had to develop that. Because otherwise you get pulled into one direction or the other. And that's part of the messaging that we get, is you've got to pick a lane. You either kind of go down the Zen lane and just be satisfied and that's fine, or work, graft until somehow you figure out that you're enough, which I don't think that's a thing. Whereas the kind of the emotional superposition probably says both can be true, that you can be both enough and satisfied, but also extremely hungry and able to do more. So I think there's the instilling of that in a workplace, in the ethos of a company, is probably helpful. I think one of the things that we're looking at with the Mood It project is allowing a corporate version of that to exist, where people within the company can very easily share how they feel at any, kind of at random points throughout the day, week, month, etc. And what that does is it creates a real-time pulse for an organisation. So as opposed to employee surveys that will happen every 6 months or every year or whatever, where you get a snapshot of some issues. What this does is it allows a real pulse of an organisation, and so people can start detecting if there's teams that are going to be prone to burnout soon because something's not working there, then you can get that early warning system. And I think that's the kind of thing that employers are probably going to start doing.
So this would be an anonymous?
Yeah, so just in the same way that the app works, it'd be either an on-screen kind of app or widget that happens with either in your phone or your desktop or laptop, and then you can just very quickly share how you feel, put some context to it, and then that will be anonymously kind of collated for an organisation. And because it's kind of, you'd be prompted randomly, it's not there to capture after certain events or before certain events. It's there just to kind of have a real-time
Would
pulse.
it give any tips or
so to
help the individual?
So the next bit of that would be, there's a resource database that we're building as well, which is all about anxiety management, confidence building, lots of things that are kind of applicable in the workplace. So that if someone's kind of wants to do a few modules on something and really develop a skill, then you can. Or if someone just needs kind of a 5-minute, listen, I'm about to go into a meeting, I'm nervous, I just need to chill out and just plug into my computer and relax for a minute before I go in, then you can do that. And then the third level would be that we've got kind of a psychology element to it, where companies can actually buy in some therapy and some coaching for employees if they want. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for emotional well-being in the workplace, which I think is going to be pretty much the standard and the norm for corporations over the next 5 or 10 years. I think if there's not a mental health element, kind of a mental well-being element to the workplace, then people are going to be lagging behind. That's how I kind of see the next 5 or 10 years.
Also, I think the stats now is that there's 20 to 25% of job vacancies that employers just can't fill. I guess it goes right to the top then, because the people who, the business owners and say the MDs of these companies, they also need support because they must be under serious pressure as well.
Yeah, I mean, every single person in the organisation is a human and will experience human emotions. And I think this is something that's probably not talked about, is that being in the upper echelons of a company doesn't protect you from severe stress, anxiety, and doesn't qualify you per se to be better at dealing with difficult times or difficult situations than someone else. And so, yeah, I think every single person in an organisation will at some point or other benefit from upskilling in their kind of emotional literacy and navigating difficult emotions here. Would that kind of application be something that you'd be interested in for your organisation potentially?
So we've explored all angles to try and get our staff in the best possible position for themselves. That would be a great starter to get information and get to feel how people are. What I also promote is face-to-face, where you can look somebody in the eyes and truly see how they're feeling, or truly understand. A bit like if they need a hug, if they need a conversation. I think that it works I think it works well both in tandem, because people can stay anonymous if they need to be anonymous, but they can also come forward and see someone in person.
Absolutely.
So we are very proactive in looking at all possibilities of just doing the best as a human, not just to make sure the bottom line is better. We're doing it because we care.
Absolutely, and that would be the point of the early warning system, would be that it would alert a company that there is a problem and that they'd have to do something. It wouldn't be that a company should outsource the solution, the mental health solution, somewhere else. If there's a problem within a company that's causing an issue, then highlighting that means that the company's then kind of forced to do what you said and have a connection with someone.
We talked about the stats before about children, but surely if the stats on this must be huge. So if most companies, I imagine, would have some sort of
I think
problem if that's or some issue to address.
A couple of years ago, the WHO did a study, and it was in the US. I think they found that lost productivity because of mental health difficulties was over $1 trillion a year in companies. So it's something that, as a I guess an addressable market, is huge, and it's about finding the balance of giving the companies enough information that they can do something with, but also equipping them with some resources that they can actually kind of use and have at their disposal for the employees. Because I think a lot of companies are probably worried that if they get into that, then kind of HR, it causes them a bigger HR headache than not knowing. But actually the evidence is quite the opposite, that if you start troubleshooting early on, you're less likely to face kind of long-term sickness and burnout and all the other things that come with it. So it's really about companies having an ethos to say, we like to know so that we can kind of be the best version of ourselves as a company.
I love to engage with people like you, because I see this as an opportunity for those people out there that are proactive or are willing to learn and be better. One of the things I tell any of my team or staff, that there's two things going to happen. You're going to grow and evolve in my company, or you're going to leave. But I said, either way, do your very best and gain as much knowledge as you can, as long as gain as much knowledge as you can while you're under my umbrella. Because if you feel that someday you've outgrown our business, well, that's well done to you. You've got the confidence and you've got the wings to fly and do your own thing. If you're still valued and you're somebody that we can't afford to lose, then we're going to go on that journey with you, and we're going to help you grow, and then you will be, wherever you want to be within the company, you will then be able to say, right, Sean, time now you listen to me. I need to be your business partner. I need you to invest in me. I need whatever you need within the organization. So I always do my best to try and promote growth, or whatever they see as being better for themselves. And the second thing is, then other companies probably won't be able to poach them, because if you're able to look after your team and your staff to a really high level, people won't want to leave you. And you end up then, as you say, productivity for globally, a lack of productivity is poor, but I would say our productivity is really, really good, because we see value in that. It's just another way of investing in your business, or investing in yourself, investing in your team. But it's a very proactive way to do it.
And do you think that what you do is scalable? Can you, if you 10x the size of your business, could you still do it?
Easily, because I'm great at handing over jobs. I quickly try and find somebody that can take on the responsibility, and with that shared responsibility, I then have a business partner, or I have somebody that is incentivized very well to take ownership of that new business, that new project, I'm definitely somebody who doesn't want to have 100% of anything. I try to give as much as I can away that is fair, that person feels that they're valued or they have autonomy to be in charge of their own direction as well. I think it's very, very important that people have autonomy, and it's not me, because I can't spread myself that thin, or else I would end. There has been times in the past that I've been the hindrance to the business because there's been too much going on. So I love people doing well. It's my driver for other people to do well, but it's also possibly the recipe for how I've done so well, because I genuinely care about the success of others as much as I do myself.
And is that part of your secret blueprint?
Growing up on the farm again, my values and my lessons, growing up on the farm, the farmers would never survive if they all stayed in their own house and worked the land individually. When it was time to bale the hay, milk the cows, do whatever they had to do, all farmers got together and they all helped each other, and everybody succeeded. Everyone survived. Now, if you go back into humanity, that's how we all survived. We all survived by helping each other. So I don't think I've reinvented the wheel. I just think that I took the values of growing up unknowingly and kind of rebelliously tweaked them a bit, but stayed true to my values.
So do you think that because we've created a more individualistic society, the knock-on effect has been that people aren't as happy?
I think the awareness of what is available. I read Sapiens, and in the book Sapiens he talks about a colony of 50 people, but when that colony grows to 100, they split. And if there's only 50 people, then you're only comparing yourself to those 50 people or those 100 people. But the problem now we have is that it's so apparent that we're comparing ourselves. The problem we now have is we're comparing ourselves to 8 billion people. So there's no way I'm the most handsome out of 8 billion people. There's no way I'm going to be the most wealthiest out of 8 billion people. I'm definitely not going to be happier. So our levels of awareness is just gone through the roof. And then...
But by the same token, we're also told that we should try and be all of those things, the happiest, and the notion of self-care being, I think it's one of the most damaging kind of messaging that we've had in recent years, is this idea that self-care is the most important thing that we should all do. Because it's quite clear that what you're describing is deriving meaning and value in your life because other people around you have risen as a result of your actions. So it's not just that you've made a load of money and then you sat there and gone, oh, this is great. What you've done is helped a load of other people rise too. And that's the bit that you've spoken about, saying, look, this is where I'm at, this is the meaning, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I'm still doing what I'm doing. But if you were just thinking, all I need to do is make as much as I can and whatever, no one else matters because it's about me and my self-care, then how satisfied would you be?
It just wouldn't happen.
Right.
But I'd be really unhappy if I ended up in that place.
Yeah, and maybe that's kind of a word of warning to anyone that is on a journey like that, is if you're thinking that there's some intrinsic satisfaction by reaching a material goal or kind of an arbitrary number or a figure or whatever, it doesn't happen, does it?
Well, inflation would soon. Warren Buffett talks about how $1 is now only worth the equivalent to 6 cents. Yeah. So inflation, if you have your goals always move, and you have to be ready to move with the goals. And as you go into your different parts of your life, you have to be ready that what you wanted before is definitely not what you will want in the future. And that's okay. I just think the goal of helping others succeed is something that can go through generations, can grow through as you get older. And then there's a connection with human beings that if you watch other people succeed, most of us, it's the support, it's the empathy, it's the love, it's I think it's our driver.
So shouldn't that be the baseline, I guess, as a motivator?
It should be. One thing that I'm not in the masses of, I don't consume a lot of information. I don't have access to daily social media. I don't have access to daily news. I don't have access to a lot of what goes on in the world.
Why is that?
For my own mental health, I find that if I was to read the headlines or capture what's going on without having a detailed understanding, I do find it's a scary place to read headlines or to get snippets of information that you don't really understand, because newspapers have to sell.
Sure.
And the headlines are always terrifying. And in 2008 I realized that. In 2008, when the property crash came, I was heavily affected. I was days from bankruptcy, and looking at those headlines terrified me. And maybe because I had no choice, I turned off the news, and I swore that I wouldn't turn on another news channel again, or I wouldn't buy a newspaper again. And if I really wanted to understand something, I would study on it, I would focus on it, and I would get to the deep understanding of what that topic is, so it's protected me in a way. And then, so my world now is the world where it's my close people, and they feed me the information that I guess I need.
Okay, so what are you worried about? Like news, like you read news headlines and you get worried. What are you worried would happen to you?
It would probably take up valuable time. It would fill my head full of information that wouldn't be actionable then, and it would probably take up my time that I could be focusing on something better.
Okay. How do you know what's better? I guess I'm wondering how you know how to filter, kind of the blanket filter of all information. Could that have a negative side effect of you actually missing out on ending up with information and drive to go in a different direction or to make a difference in a different way that you just miss out on because you've gone, well, I have to protect myself at all costs?
I don't think there's any information that will flash up on a news channel that means that I'm missing out. Books, I read a lot of books. Mm-hmm. I spend a lot of time with interesting people like yourselves. So I get deep into the understanding of a situation.
Okay. So would you say that you're fairly kind of up to date with kind of what's going on in the world all the time, the current affairs and things like that? Or
no.
Yeah. So how, I guess there's a bit of a conflict there.
Well, what's happened in recent years, and also, to be fair, what happened in 2008, if I had have gone along with the masses of people, I probably wouldn't be sitting here now as content, because a lot of the things that I did or thought or was able to prepare for was based on my intuition and me as a person, not being told from an external party. And so I've kind of used my intuition and my support network to say, look, we're here for each other, mm-hmm. We'll get through this together. And it's worked. Sure.
And by no stretch am I saying that you should just believe anything that you're told. I'm just wondering what it is that it protects you from, and kind of why it is that you feel that you need that protection. Because you're clearly a competent and intelligent human that can kind of weigh up information, and you're well read and so on and so forth. So it's interesting that there's just this one area where you think, I need to shut this off because I don't know if I can face looking at that.
I like something that is actionable or deeply informative. And if you were to go down the route of news or daily social media. The news is okay, but if it's just headlines, I'd like to get into the nitty gritty of not just the headline or not, so I would then have to go down the rabbit hole of information. That's fine. So if there's a headline that property crash 2024, I won't see that on the news. I will have studied or looked down the history of a property cycle, where I believe we are now, maybe studied the history of interest rates, and then took an overarching view of how I see the future. I won't allow...
That's something that affects you, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's property, and you're into...
Or business.
Or business. These are all things that kind of... But there's plenty of other things in the world that probably don't directly affect you. Conflicts, politics, everything.
Everything affects all of us. We're all entwined. I believe everything that's going on does have an impact.
So then, again, coming back to it, why is it that you choose that there's certain things that you need to protect yourself from?
No, probably overload of information.
Okay. And you said because you want things that are actionable. So do you feel the need to always do something with information?
I would feel that anything outside my front door means that I can't take control of it or make action of it. If it's inside my door of my office or inside the door of my house, I'm able to take action.
And why are you worried about not having control of something?
No, it's probably just time. It's probably just time thinking about something that I am unsure about the outcome. I wouldn't say it's worried. I just think that I could spend a lot of time trying something that the outcome was not within my even within my understanding. Because when you deal with things on a bigger scale, it becomes extremely complex.
It can be, yeah.
And maybe it's because I am more simple-minded as an individual. I'm not sure the exact better way to describe it than that, but I actually think that maybe I haven't got the capacity to deal with much larger things that I believe is multifaceted, completely out of my control, or I feel it's out of my control, or maybe I'm not able to help.
It's interesting that you said that, because I think there is an overload of information coming in from social media, headlines, massive opinions, and it can be difficult to decipher all them. It can be difficult to figure out what's true and what's not. And like you said, it does mean that some things require some due diligence, some digging, some research to understand opinions. And I guess for people, I'm similar age to you, so I think for people like you and me that grew up without kind of that in our lives, it is difficult sometimes to kind of have that wash of information constantly flowing at us. But it is, by the flip side of that, is having access to that level of information probably means that minds like yours and people that can have an impact in the world, probably, if that information is used in the right way, can use it potentially to kind of make the world better rather than worse.
Absolutely, and if that's somebody's path to go down that route, if you go back to the wellness side, I don't think it's healthy to be staring at a screen all day. I'm a big fan of getting outside, getting sunlight in the morning and sunlight in the evening. And that probably has another reason why I try and stay away from, I try and read books. I try not to look at screens. Inevitable, I have to, because of my phone, because of and because of the office environment I'm in. Even in here, we've spent a few hours without any sunlight. So it could be another angle where I try to maximize my outside time. I'm not going to be able to go jogging or weightlifting and scroll through social media or
Sure.
look at news. So I've kind of developed my life as I see best placed to have focus on my business, focus on my well-being, which is definitely time restricted with blue light, with digital devices.
I probably spend way too much time on with my screen. I like to read a lot too, but I consume a lot of information via video as well, which is a double-edged sword, because I can go down rabbit holes of information and found that suddenly I've spent 2 hours researching a topic. So yeah, I think you're right, it can be a double-edged sword, and that does have knock-on effects on kind of sunlight, health, exercise, all that kind of stuff.
After discussions with Pete Williams, who's my health physician, I definitely am of the opinion that health, wellness, human beings is the most complex business in the world, and there is no answer. It's completely individual. You might see two people that do almost identical things, but one slight tweak makes such a difference. And for me personally, I've just found as safe a place I can be to keep me as optimized as I can be. So I'd like to finish on you telling me more about your app. When are we going to see it?
That's a good question. 2024, hopefully. Mid-2024 is the aim for the launch. We have a cracking team at the moment working on it, so we are hoping to launch in conjunction with doing sport events initially, with a view to trying to get people to react to what's happening in the world of sport. It's something that people are quite accustomed to and happy to share how they feel when they go to football games, when they watch their favourite sports teams, and have a bit of banter with opposing teams too. So getting people kind of sharing how they're feeling during sports games. And eventually what we're going to have is, while you're watching the football, you'll see a mood meter on screen showing the mood in Team A's town and versus Team B's town as a kind of live feed. And then going from there, we expand it out into everything else in the world, from work, news, world events, and let people really share how they're feeling about everything everywhere.
Dr. Hassan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.